The final Kenny report of the penultimate week in the election campaign. Stuff is getting real now, isn't it? And China is again front and centre of this federal election campaign. The issue escalated this morning with Sharri Markson's exclusive story in The Australian. She reported that the Deputy Labor leader, Mr Marles, has held 10 meetings with either the Chinese ambassador or senior Chinese officials over the past 5 years when relations between our two nations have deteriorated badly. I'll have more on that in a moment, but the issue took a dramatic turn this afternoon when the Defence Minister called a media conference in Perth to reveal that our Defence Forces have been tracking unusual movements by a Chinese military spy vessel off the Western Australian coast.
We've provided some information to you which shows the fact that this People's Liberation Army Navy vessel has come as far south as any of these vessels has in the past, south of Exmouth. Now, the patrol and the way in which it's hugged the coastline in Western Australia is demonstrated in the diagram that we've given to you. But as you can see, it's come into the Australian exclusive economic zone. Its intention, of course, is to collect intelligence right along the coastline and has been in close proximity to military and intelligence installations on the west coast of Australia.
Peter Dutton described this as an aggressive act by China, and he said military surveillance of the vessel by Australian forces will continue as it now heads northeast towards Darwin. But the timing of today's revelation is delicate, to say the least, just 8 days out from the election and with Labor under pressure about whether it would stand up to China.
I think people understand the difficulty that's the reality of the Indo-Pacific at the moment, the aggression, the acts of aggression from the Chinese leadership and from the Chinese government. I think Australians deserve to know what is taking place, and as I say, it's a repeat of a previous practice where we've made the public aware of these activities before.
It's certainly true the government alerted the public to Chinese military vessels and their activity in the Arafura Sea to the north of Australia back in February, when the Chinese vessel actually shone a laser beam at an Australian military aircraft. That incident was presumed to be linked to Chinese monitoring of military exercises between Australia and its allies off Queensland. No doubt we will hear more about this debate and the latest spy vessel in coming days. But earlier today, the focus was on Mr Marles, as I mentioned, and his dealings with China. The Australian reported that even Marles' Labor colleagues had been worried about his close contact with Chinese officials and his public arguments on the issues. Remember, Marles has been tipped to be either Defence Minister or Foreign Affairs Minister if Labor wins government. The Prime Minister was asked about all this morning.
I have not met with a Chinese ambassador while in any formal meeting while I've been Prime Minister, and I note those reports about the Deputy Leader of the Labor Party. It comes on top of the concerning reports about him running his speeches past the Chinese government, and now we see a very strangely high number of meetings between an opposition Member of Parliament and Chinese government officials. I mean, something doesn't sound right about that to me.
Yeah, something just doesn't sound right, hey? The issue played strongly into a National Press Club debate today between the Foreign Minister, Marise Payne, and the Shadow Foreign Minister, Penny Wong.
We all understand why Mr Morrison is saying what he's saying. We all understand that, you know, in the lead up to an election, things will get increasingly desperate and accusations would be made. But I just want to make this point, because there's been too much of this in this campaign. You know, we are all patriots. We are all patriots. Mr Morrison and the Liberal Party do not have a monopoly on patriotism.
In relation to specific approaches from Mr Marles, my understanding is a small number of those meetings were advised to my office. It's not my role to clear them or otherwise. I would describe them as being noted, but a small number, certainly not the number reported today. But I would say that it is important to be consistent. And that is certainly the approach that this government has taken in all of our engagement across the government. We know from reporting that Mr Marles has, for example, confirmed that he's provided a speech in advance to the Chinese embassy. I would not do that myself. In fact, I wouldn't provide a speech in advance to any other embassy for any reason.
As for Richard Marles, he's tried to play this down. In fact, he's even attempted to laugh off the issue.
The Liberal Party are obsessed with my diary about whether I ate salmon or chicken in that lunch. I certainly wasn't on the head table. All of that is actually about distracting from their failures here. You know, their failures in dropping the ball on Solomon Islands, on bungling the submarine program, which has made us all exposed and less safe.
Now, the China debate was always going to figure prominently in this campaign. It is a massive national security issue confronting this nation. It was stirred up at the start of the campaign because of the security deal between Solomon Islands and Beijing. But to be frank, the Coalition and Labor have both treated this debate very carefully so far. Labor has criticised the government for more than 2 years, blaming it in large part for falling out with China, blaming Australia for the falling out with China and the tensions with Beijing. And that, of course, is an argument that suits China down to the ground. But Anthony Albanese and Labor have backed away from those sort of claims as the election has drawn closer, not wanting to be seen as soft on China themselves. I expect we'll hear a lot more about this issue over the next few days.